In his landmark book Sapiens, Yuval Noah Harari posits that Homo sapiens' unique capacity to believe in stories and the power of the imagination was the key to our ability to cooperate and thrive. And there are very few people who are as accomplished at storytelling as this week's guest on the podcast, Grant Heslov. In the early part of his career, Grant was a successful actor, but was always interested in telling stories, and so teamed up with his friend from acting classes, George Clooney, to form Smokehouse Productions. Oscar-nominated and Oscar-winning movies followed, along with critically and commercially successful TV series. Grant talks about why the script is at the heart of all the great stories that Smokehouse tells, why he remains a devotee of the big screen experience for movies, why stars like his friend George are a dying breed, and his respect and appreciation of British talent. Enjoy! Hi Grant, welcome to the podcast.
Hey Danny, it's good to be here. It's good to meet you.
Lovely to meet you too. I always like to start with a fun question to get the creative juices flowing. And my question to you is, Smokehouse is an iconic LA drinking and dining venue, but if you were launching a production company now, which place or venue would you name that company after?
Yeah, it's a good question. That restaurant and bar was a place that when George and I were George, who's my partner, were very young. We used to go there and drink and eat. And then when he was acting on ER, Warner Brothers is right across the street from the Smokehouse. And so eventually, when we were trying to find a name for our company, we couldn't think of a name. We literally was days and days and days of trying to think of a name. And then he called me from the car as he was driving home, and he's like, "How about the Smokehouse?" Because he had passed it, and I said, "Perfect." And that kind of was how that came about. But nowadays, since I don't hang out in bars anymore, and I don't, probably be some named after some smoothie place, or it would probably have something more to do with family than it would anything else. So it's a good question. There's a restaurant that we go to called Asanebo in Los Angeles. So maybe we would name it after that.
Very good. Sounds very catchy. Happy Days, Joni Loves Chachi, Family Ties. Your acting career started on some of the most iconic sitcoms in the history of US television, all with a strong family narrative. Was acting in your family, and how did you find your way into it?
No, acting couldn't have been further away from my family. And I always wanted to be an actor, since I can ever remember. That's kind of really all I wanted to do. And those shows that you mentioned, I grew up on those shows. I have vivid memories of watching all of those shows, and to be able to work on them was a pretty amazing thing. My father was a dentist. My mother was in real estate. There was, they didn't have any friends who were in the business, so I didn't know anything about it.
And so you gravitated towards acting classes and USC, and that was your way into it, I guess.
Well, I started, in as many people do in junior high school, trying to do plays, and then in high school, drama, and then when I was a junior in high school, I started studying with like a real acting teacher who had students in her class that actually, worked, and so I started to get more of a taste for it then, and then I went to USC and studied theater and acted in college. And it was during college that I, got an agent one summer, and then, got my first audition for, I think it was Joni Loves Chachi. It was Joni Loves, well, that was the first one. And, went in and I got it and started shooting it that day. It was all like, it was very fast. I barely had time to call my mom and tell her I got the job.
Very good. I'm sure she was. I'm sure she was very proud. So, having started on the TV side, next came movie roles in big films like True Lies, The Birdcage, Enemy of the State, Dante's Peak, and The Scorpion King. Do you think your acting experience has informed your subsequent work as a writer, director, and producer?
Um, well, look, when you're acting, I mean, you spend so much time on a set that you're not doing anything. There's a lot of waiting, as you know, there's a lot of waiting around on sets, particularly for actors, because you might rehearse a scene, then they have to light it, they have to, then you have to, turn around and shoot it from different angles, and so there's a lot of time. And I was pretty early on, I was interested in that process, in the way the directors worked, in the way the script worked, and how the camera worked. I just was interested in it all, and so I would usually probably to the annoyance of a lot of these people, I would pick the brains of, the DP or the director or the writer or the producer and, just hang out, talk to them. And I really, you learn a lot doing that. You learn a lot just by doing it. So I took advantage of that time, I think. And that also fed the desire to then try to do those things as well. So I think it was sort of it was a pretty easy transition.
One of the things that I've observed is that writers who come from an acting background have a real strength in dialogue, for example.
Mm.
Is that something you think is a particular strength if you've come from that acting background in the way that you put a script together, for example?
I think it certainly doesn't hurt. Um, I don't know if I'm trying to think of because I know a lot of actors turned writers. In fact, the majority of everything that we do in our business, people started off as actors. I think, a lot of directors started off as actors, a lot of writers, a lot of producers, and yeah, I think that being able to sort of say words in your mouth and have them feel natural and real is a good skill to have, and I think actors have that skill. But look, the truth is, some of many and most of the greatest writers in the world were never actors, and they could write great dialogue too. So I'm not sure how much water that holds.
In 1999, your friend George Clooney, who you'd met at acting classes, formed Section 8 with director Steven Soderbergh after the success of their collaboration on Out of Sight, and you joined the company shortly afterwards. And then in 2005, Good Night and Good Luck, which you co-wrote with George, was released and nominated for 6 Oscars. What impact did that movie's success and acclaim have on you personally and professionally?
Well, I mean, that was the very first movie that I had written or co-written, and it was the first movie that I produced. And in a rare instance, if you look at that film, there's only one. I'm the only producer on it. You never would see that ever again. I'm not sure. I'm trying to think if I've done any other movie where I've been the sole producer. There's this as you know, there's this proliferation of producers on films anymore. And when I watch a film with somebody who's not in the business, and sometimes you see, 5, 10, 15, 20 producers, they're like, well, what do all these people do? And I say exactly. What do all these people do? Um, I mean, generally, there's a couple of people that are sort of the what I consider to be the real producers, and then there are a lot of people who get attached along the way for different reasons, or they could be financiers, or they could the sort of the list is endless. But that movie afforded, it got us or got me, it got my foot in the door, so that you have some credibility, I suppose. Personally, it was a wonderful achievement, and I had a blast making the film, and also, the history. George and I we met in acting class when I was 18 and he was 20, and we had been, best buddies since that point. So for us to be able to sort of have that ride and that experience together, there is nothing better than that.
And I guess leading up to that, then in 2006, you and George set up Smokehouse Productions. What inspired you to set the company up?
Well, George and Stephen had been partners, and at that point, Stephen in his life, he didn't want to. He wanted to just sort of be off on his own, and Stephen had a very finite time that he wanted to be. in a partnership. And so when the natural thing for us, for George and I, was then to just continue on our partnership, and we had such a good time on Good Night and Good Luck, and we love to write together. So it just seemed like it was a very natural progression.
So as we talked about, the actual smokehouse is in Burbank, opposite Warner Brothers.
Yeah.
But it also feels like a state of mind. I mean, I've been there. It's amazing. It feels very much like old Hollywood and kind of a physical manifestation of old Hollywood, but also a state of mind in some ways.
Hmm.
In an entertainment business that can feel increasingly corporate, dominated by data and algorithmic decision making. How important to the Smokehouse ethos are some of those traditional Hollywood qualities of backing writing and acting talent and also personal relationships?
Well, for us, that's everything, right? I mean, a great screenplay trumps everything. You can't make a great film without a great screenplay. It's absolutely, I think it's impossible. And you need to have relationships with writers. In our case, it's relationships also not just with the writers of screenplays, but the writers of books, of magazines, of, IP, because that's fundamentally what we are interested in. We like stuff that's based on something we can sort of we can see the movie or see the TV show kind of in our minds even before we spend years and years on something. Um, you're right that the world, this entertainment world, is getting smaller and smaller every day, literally every day. And it is data driven in the sense that, when you turn on your TV and watch something, they know when you watch it, they know when you started it, they know if you finished it, they know. I mean, I've had executives say to me, "Yeah, we really want to work on this. We're getting a lot of people to tune in, but they're turning off at minute, this and this and this and um, all that information, I suppose, is useful, but I think that it's just never the way that I approach making a movie or a TV show. I and George and I both, we come from the school. We want to make something that we'd want to watch, and we want to make something that, is going to mix things up, that's going to take chances, that's going, for whatever the reasons are. And I'm never going to start making something because I have to fulfill some kind of a number or a mandate, or I don't find that interesting.
2009 saw the release of The Men Who Stare at Goats, a darkly satirical movie which you directed, and the following year came The American, directed by Anton Corbijn, a director renowned for his very distinct visual style.
Hmm.
As a producer, how do you decide which director can deliver on a script's vision and actually what inspires you to direct a movie or a project?
Well, I wanted to direct something. I had directed a short film before George and I started our partnership. So this would have been 20 over 25 years ago. I directed a short. He was in the film, and I'm in it, and a bunch of people were in it, and I just loved it. I loved making it. I wrote it, I directed it. I did everything. I did craft service. I did whatever I had to do. So I got that bug, and Men Who Stare at Goats was a book written by John Ronson, who, is I think, a British treasure. He has a mind that I love. I love the way it works. And I read this screenplay that Peter Straughan, also a Brit and one of my favorite writers, had written this script, and I read it, and I was like, I understand this script. The subject that was about, I had interest in it, and I thought it was deeply funny and dark and was right sort of in my tone wheelhouse. And so I wanted to make it. And so I just sort of pushed myself onto it and through it. And when it came to the American was something that we came to that was already, I think that script had already been written by another Brit, and you can see that we have an affinity for Brits. And I believe Anton was already on it by the time we got on it, but we thought he was a terrific director, a really interesting eye, and he was working with a DP who we were interested in, and who subsequently I've made many films and TV shows with, a guy named Martin Rue, a guy from Germany who's just fantastic. But choosing directors is it's always a tricky thing. It's a big leap of faith. It really is. Because so many things go into making a movie, and so many things have to go right to make a great movie. And it's pretty amazing that great movies get made. I mean, we sit at home and it's easy to be critical and it's easy to, and people who don't work in the film or television business are always astounded when they come and see something being made because it is a lot of work and it takes a lot of people. And picking a director it's always challenging, and particularly directors who, if it's their first film, right? You've seen a short or they've written something. So I wish there was a good formula for it. I think it's a lot of it's about gut and instinct, and also the directors that you like. There are certain directors that I would they could direct traffic for me, and I would work with them.
Stars made Hollywood and star talent rather than IP driven franchises has been at the heart of Smokehouse's movies. The 2011 release, The Ides of March, is a great example of a movie packed with incredible star talent and an Oscar nominated screenplay that you co wrote. In 2025, what makes a star and how do you spot star quality?
Hmm. Well, look, the truth is, the Ides of March. I don't know that we could have made that film for the theater in 2025. I don't know. It's hard to know. It's such a different world. And I don't know what makes a star because it's such a different, it's a different. I was watching, they do this Academy Museum gala to raise money for the Academy Museum. And so it's lots of movie stars, but it's also, it's the Kardashians and it's this influencer and it's that person and it's celebrity, almost more than stardom in a way. And I think it's harder to be a star anymore in the sense that everybody's too available. Everybody, when I was younger, when you were younger, you know, when a Clint Eastwood film came out, you didn't know everything. You just wanted to see that film. And there was a mystery to it, and there was an allure to it that I don't think we have anymore in a way because, well, I mean, most people are watching films, on a phone or an iPad. That we don't have that same communal experience in a movie theater the way that we used to. I mean, some people do, and some people go to the movies, and I hope and pray that people continue to go to movies. But it wasn't like people lining up around the block to go see Jaws. It didn't have that same thing, and I think information is the greatest thing in the world. But I also feel like it does take away some of the allure. I mean, I think George is sort of, he's an example of a dying breed in a way, right? And when you think about it, like who are the movie stars that compare to the movie stars of, let's even say like the 60s and 70s, of Paul Newman and Robert Redford and any of them, James Caan, and there's a long list of them. Um, I just think it's harder now, and it's nobody's fault. It's just that there's so much information.
I mean, one of the reasons I picked up on that question in relation to Ides of March is because I would say Ryan Gosling is probably one of the
Hmm.
few stars that we still have, or is still in that category. He can open a film, he plays in lots of different genres, and he still seems to have this magnetic quality. And I just wondered if you could spot that back in 2011 on a movie like Ides of March. Did he exude that quality?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we knew he was there aren't in his age range. I mean, there are not a ton of those kind of actors. It's a handful, I think, and he's certainly one of them. And no, we knew that he was the right guy and he was the guy for it. If you spend any time with him off screen, and then he's just he's one of the guys who, yeah, I would love to keep working with.
And looking across your career, it's kind of a connected question, but are stars more or less important now? I mean, there may be few of them, but do they still retain that importance, or to some extent has that now been eroded because of that lack of mystique that you're talking about?
Well, no, look, I still think you need stars, particularly to make movies. Television, you can get away with a lot more, I think, and consequently, some of the best things being made are on television. Like you knew who Bryan Cranston was, but he certainly wasn't a star, you know. And then you make Breaking Bad and shows that I revere, like The Wire, or I mean, there's so many of them, and you guys do a lot of them over here too. Some of these British dramas that I just love. It's funny because we're here, my wife and I are living in London right now, and so we're watching a lot of British television, and all of a sudden you're like, hey, that's the woman who was in that one, and she was in that one, and she was in, it's a small pool, but really talented. British actors really. I work with a lot of British actors. They're good.
You're a four-time Oscar nominee for screenplay and picture for Good Night and Good Luck, screenplay for Ides of March, and in 2012 you joined a select club of Best Picture Oscar winners with Argo. At what point did you start to realize that Argo could be an awards contender and even winner?
Probably I remember the first time that I saw, the first cut, and I was like, wow, this is a great film. This film is great. I love this film. Um, but I really didn't think much about it past that. Really thinking about, okay, how are we going to release this, and what are my notes, and how do we make it better, and all those things. But I think it was when we tested it. I think the first test we tested it. When you put it in front of a real audience, and then you get their feedback, and you just can feel it. You can feel it in the room. That's why tests are so great. I don't love tests for um, there's two things you do in a test. One is they give out these cards, and everybody fills out a card, and there's maybe 100 questions or whatever it is, and then they collate all the data, and then you can start to see some trends and things. Like, it's particularly good if people are like completely confused about something, and everybody's confused, so then you got to address it. But then they also do these things called focus groups, and they'll pick 15 people out of the audience, and they stay after, and then somebody moderates it, and you sit in the back and you watch, and those always devolve no matter what. Like, even if everybody raises their hand and everybody loved it at the beginning, by the end they've convinced themselves that they hated it, and there's always like two guys or two women, or a woman and a guy who like went to film school, and so they want to rip it apart and all that stuff. But the Argo one, you could but what's great is it's like being watching a play. You can feel the audience. When you have them, you lost them. And in Argo is a film that you really, you need people to almost be up and cheering at the end when they escape, and it did all that, and it got all the laughs that it was supposed to get. And I was like, oh my God, this is really something. So I think that was probably when I knew. And then as you start to go to festivals and as you start to put it out in the world, you can start to feel it.
And what's the ceremony like when you're in contention for the biggest prize?
It's amazing. I mean, you've worked on something. This one for this, this is one I read an article, and I said, wow, this would make a great movie. And then here we are. It was quite a long time. Here we are 10 years later. Now we're in this awards thing. And I had done it before. This was the third time I've been through this. And I know people who are listening to this are going to say, "Oh, this isn't true," but it's exhausting because you have to go to every night. You have to go to another thing, another screening, shake people. It's like it's like running for president or something. Um, so that part I don't enjoy so much, but what I do enjoy is you get to go to see your film screen all the time, and and George and I, we love to go to screenings and just wait for it to start, and then just sneak in the back and stand at the back. And every time we do it, particularly with a film like that, you get caught up in it with the audience, and I love doing that. But the great thing about the award that season, that when you're on that thing, is you're on it with lots of other films. So it's like and you're all at the same things and the same events and the same thing, and so you meet a lot of people, and there's a lot of joking, and so there's a lot of fun as well.
Are you nervous when you're waiting to hear if you've got it? I mean, it must be, there must be a lot of nervous energy.
Yeah, I was pretty. You're pretty nervous. I mean, a good night and good luck. I never thought we were going to win. I was just happy to be nominated. I never expected us to win all those other ones. Argo, by the time we got to the actual Academy Awards, we had won every single award, right? So we had won, the BAFTA, the Golden Globe, all of them. And so I was like, oh, well, that means we're never going to win this because but I felt pretty good about it. You never know for sure because people can, for all kinds of reasons. But so therefore I was more nervous because I felt close, like I felt close to it. The other ones, I was just happy, I just to be acknowledged and to be nominated, and but I knew that there were other films that were going to win those years.
Smokehouse has been associated with different studios across film and TV. As an independent producer, what capabilities do you look for in these partnerships? And going back to that issue about relationships, does that ultimately trump economics in these deals in the way that you make the decisions that you do on who you're going to partner up with?
Well, to an extent, yes. I mean, the economics have to be right because filmmaking is an expensive proposition, and to develop material, you need somebody to help you pay for it. But I think that the who is running a studio and who the executives are at this studio is equally as important because if you don't trust their taste and they don't trust your taste, then you're never going to make anything together. And it's not just the making of the film, then it's the marketing of the film. You have to really trust you have to really trust the people who are, you're basically making this thing and then you're handing it to them. But you're also in partnership. When you make a film, you are in partnership with the studio. They are your partners. They're giving you money and you have to be responsible for that. You're giving them a creative vision, but at the same time, it's not a blank check. There are expectations on both sides, and we've been lucky. We've had great relationships, with the places that we've been. We're currently at Warner Brothers, and we're back at Warner Brothers. We're back across from the Smokehouse, and they've got great people running it now, and so we're very happy to be there.
You've also been very willing to embrace newer distribution models, particularly streaming. 2020's release, The Midnight Sky, appeared on Netflix after a short theatrical window. 2021's The Tender Bar with Amazon and 2024's Wolves with Apple. F. Scott Fitzgerald said that an artist is someone who can hold two opposing viewpoints and still remain fully functional. As an artist and also as a producer, do you have opposing viewpoints about traditional theatrical releasing versus direct to streaming releasing? Or are you platform agnostic when it comes to a movie's release?
No, I'm definitely not agnostic. I would always prefer to have a theatrical release. We make our films. When I say we, I don't mean just George and I mean filmmakers. They make their films to be seen on a screen. That's how they shoot them. That's how they conceive them. And the experience of seeing a film in a theater with an audience is just completely different. I mean, if you saw Argo, in a theater, the experience that you had would be very different than if you saw it at home. Not that the home experience couldn't be good, but it's just there's something about that shared experience. So that's where I come from. That's how I was raised. That's when I was 5 years old, and I'd go with my brother, and my mom would give us, $5 to go to and you could go to the movies all day long. And so I love films. Now I also understand what the economics in the world are. So Midnight Sky was meant to be in theaters, but COVID prevented that. So that was a hard one. Wolves was also meant for the theaters, but Apple, and I think didn't Wolves open? Well, it didn't open in theaters at all. I don't even remember. It's been a couple movies ago. Um, some of those were just like that's the way you get the movie made.
It was in 2019 that you went back to your TV roots, and it was the work of another giant of US literature, Joseph Heller, that attracted you with an adaptation of Catch-22. You also starred and directed two episodes. How did you juggle directing yourself and performing at the same time?
Well, saying that I starred in it is nice of you, but I mean, I had a very supporting role, um, but I did have the character that I played has the most famous scene in I think that in the film, in the original film, in the book, and also in our show. I think it's the doctor, and it's the scene that explains Catch 22. Basically, it's the Catch 22. And so that was in my episode, so I had to direct that scene. But I don't worry about it because George is there. Because if he's directing, I'm producing. If I'm directing, he's producing. So you always have that. So I figured out how I wanted to shoot the scene a couple days before, and we talked about it and stuff. And then on the day I was to shoot it, he was sick, so he wasn't there. And so it was very challenging to shoot it. I mean, I had been working on the lines because you know, as we get older, our ability to memorize lines isn't what it was when we were in our 20s. And then I haven't really been acting much. I haven't been acting at all, really. So that's like a muscle. And so I started learning those lines. And there was a lot of lines I started learning in months and months before, so that I could, because I didn't want to struggle on the day. And of course, I struggled on the day anyway. Um, I usually hate everything I'm in, and I'm usually very hard on myself. But I have to say, I'm very proud of that scene. Um, it was really fun to shoot. It was really hard to shoot, but I think it served the exact purpose that I had hoped.
So, what are the really important creative choices you face at readapting work from book and film like Catch-22? How do you make those decisions and try and create that distinctive piece?
Well, for on Catch 22, Luke Davis wrote those scripts, and he wrote great scripts. He just did it. That's why when it kind of goes back to what I first said, it's all about the script, right? And that's the unsung. It's not unsung in the business. Everybody knows that and that's why good big writers make a lot of money, because it's hard to do, and there's not a ton of people who can do it. Um, Luke happens to be one of them, and he wrote these pieces that George and I read, and it was similar to the experience I had when I read The Men Who Stare at Goats, that script. And ironically, or maybe not ironically, incidentally, they're tonally very similar. I mean, Men Who Stare at Goats is a direct steal from Catch 22 in a certain sense, just in its tone, particularly for the Ewan McGregor character. He's in this world, and it's all happening to him, and it's like, he's surrounded by all these crazy people. But um, so for George and I in that one, it was more about a directorial style, about how we wanted the show to look, how we wanted to feel, casting, uh, the way we wanted it to feel when we shot the aerial stuff and the stuff inside the cockpit, and how we wanted the audience to feel when they saw that stuff, and so that was the work for us.
And that show was for Hulu. The studio was Paramount, and Sky Italia was also a co-production partner.
Yeah.
As a producer, is there comfort in having a global streamer buy out and fully finance a series, or does that territory sales and back end model still also interest you?
Well, it does interest me, but on something like Catch 22, again, it's not the easiest sell. I mean, it was easier because we had George in it. That's really what made it do the business that it did. And there were other, cast members who added value as well. Um, but no, I was thankful and thrilled that Sky would step in. And that's the way everything gets made these days. You have to kind of cobble it together with different partners. And I mean, even in big studios these days, sometimes they only want, they don't want to take all that risk, and studios split it, or there's all kinds of different ways. So um, I haven't really delved too much into the financing world of television. we really just don't do a lot of that.
So you're back in the world of TV with the agency,
Hmm.
based on the French series Le Bureau. What attracted you to the original series and the idea of adapting it as an English language format?
Well, I mean, anybody if anybody hasn't seen it, they should after they watch ours. Um, it's just a terrific, it's a beautifully made television show. It's basically it's a love story told over five seasons, but set in the world of for them it's the French intelligence agency. For us, it's the CIA. And it's a story of two people who can't be together, what lengths somebody will go to to be with their love. And so we loved it, and it was an easy, it was easy. When you see it, it's not a big leap when somebody comes and pitches you and they pitch it, and then that's one thing. But when you've seen it, you've actually seen it. The trick was, and actually the reason not to do it is because you want to, the bar is already high. And so, but we had Jez and John Henry Butterworth, also Brits, who are, just fantastic writers, and, turned it into something that it feels very different to the original while maintaining those pieces of the story that were sort of the most compelling.
And given that this was a TV show that existed, and as you say, the creative bar was very high,
Hmm.
how did you reimagine that series for an English language CIA world?
Well, the main thing was we set it in the CIA, which is a very different the Bureau in France. It's a much smaller operation. It's a much, and so we said, well, let's make this big. Let's make it a much bigger, more American. Let's set it in a foreign. Let's make it a smaller station of the CIA in a foreign country. We talked about which country that could be, and we ended up in with London because London we could still have everybody speaking English, and it would make life easier for the cast and all that stuff, and just build it out from there really. And then cast, the casting was the hardest and the easiest part. I mean, we were like, well, Michael Fassbender's the guy that should play this guy. Like he seems to be. If we could get him right, probably won't get him, but if we could get him, and then we ended up, he read it and he loved it, and then, we hired Joe Wright to direct the first two episodes and to set the tone and the look of the show. And, Joe's another Brit. I just keep pointing him out. Um, he's got such an amazing eye. And so he set a look for the show that's very, very different, colder, probably more slick. And then subsequently, I directed some of the episodes. We've had terrific directors, and sort of my job is to sort of just make sure that we're all making the same show. So I always tell everybody, look, we're just making a 10-hour movie, basically. That's what we're doing. And so even though we're different directors, let's all figure out a way to talk in the same language visually and sonically with music and sound, and then, cast great actors who can sort of make all the stuff work on screen.
And then going back to something you alluded to earlier, can you still tell intimate, character-driven stories like The American in film? And would Ides of March now be a TV series in the same vein as House of Cards, which it shares some DNA with because of the writer being Beau Willimon? Has TV now really moved into that space that maybe in the past film dominated?
Yes, I do. I look. I love television. I love finding a show and binging it, and maybe there's three seasons of it. I love it. To get lost in it. It's like I like reading. I read a lot of books. I love reading long books. I hate it when a book ends. I want to just be in that world and just. And as a filmmaker, television lets you explore stories and character in a way that you can never do in film. But that's also what makes film great, is that, you have these limitations, and somehow I feel like those 2 hour stories, hour and a half, 2.5, whatever that window is, forces you to tell a story in a way that is economical and has a real beginning, middle, end in a way that in television you don't have to do that. You have because you have time, right? I know we're at a crossroads, and I know that people say, "Oh, we've always been here." There was a DVD, and there was this, and there was that, and stuff. I do feel like we are at a crossroad, um, because I think the economics of it, and I think that if people don't go to if enough people don't go to the theaters can't afford to stay open, and if they can't stay open, then there's no theaters to go to, and I just think we got to make better films. We got to make films that are going to get people in the, and I do think people crave to go to some people, not all people, but I think a lot of people crave to go to theaters. I myself hadn't gone to a theater. So last year, just around this time, right? I guess it was just around this time, my wife and I looked at each other. We hadn't been to the theater in like a couple of years, since COVID really had come. Now I go see movies in theaters. Like I'll go to a screening or whatever. Or somebody invites me to a screening or a premiere, whatever, whatever. So I've been to a theater, but not to where I bought a ticket, looked at the paper. You don't even look at the paper anymore. Looked at on the internet, found a movie I wanted to see, and went. So I said, let's go to the movies tonight. And I just was looking to see, and I saw this film, Honora, and it was at a certain time, and it just all I knew that it had won the Palme d'Or. I didn't know anything. I knew nothing about it, not one thing. And we went to the movies here in London, and it was the greatest night of our year. I mean, it was fantastic. That movie, we were just blown away how good the movie was, what the audience, the whole experience. And I think I do think people love that experience and want that experience, that communal experience. But it's incumbent upon us filmmakers to make films that are good. And hopefully some of these studios will keep doing it, because if they give up on it, I think we'll be in trouble.
So finally, I always like to end with a fun question. And that f fun question is, if an alien race suddenly appeared from space and threatened to destroy the world and all the people in it, and you were tasked with trying to find a way to convince them not to do that, which movie or TV series would you show them to prove the case that humanity is worth saving?
Yeah, that is a good question. Um, I mean, there's many levels to that question because do you show them a movie? You just show them a great movie to show them like that our civilization can make this kind of art. And I thought, no, not really. I mean, because like if you showed somebody The Godfather, they think our civilization was, bonkers, even though that's one of my favorite films, right? Um, so maybe two come to mind. One is more nostalgic. It's a film that one of my daughters loved as a kid, and I must have watched it 400 times. And it's Finding Nemo. And I feel like I would be proud for any alien universe to see that film. Um, but for an adult film and for a film that I love, I probably would screen To Kill a Mockingbird. It's probably the film that I would choose because I think it really does show sort of, the best of humanity and the best kind of man. And I just think it's a beautiful film.
Well, it's a wonderful choice. I've asked a few people that question, and no one's ever said Mars Attacks. So I can
Ah,
I can
well,
see why.
has there been any that have been repeated, or has everybody had a different film?
No, I think everyone's got a different film and a different perspective. As you say, there's multiple levels to it, but both wonderful choices that I've probably watched quite a few times myself. Well, Grant Heslov, thanks so much for being a guest on Here Comes Pod. Only a madman would agree to be a guest on the podcast when you've got so much on and being so busy. But I think you've demonstrated that as well as being sane, you're very kind to have agreed. And so I'm left with no choice but to send you back out there with many more missions to drop creative ordnance and truth bombs on the world.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.